Let's call a spade a spade. Pokémon is a kid's game. A casual kids game where the competitive scene is not and will never be the main focus of the developers. Regardless of the intentions of the developers though, fans will play the game however they want. For casual fans, this could just be playing the story mode of the game, defeating the gyms, and becoming the champion of the Pokémon League. Some fans like to shiny hunt or complete the entire Pokédex or complete side quests. It's not uncommon for competitive fans to do this too, but their main focus is generally on getting the best Pokémon to use for competitive battling and devising strategies and whatever optimal gameplay components necessary to win games. Since the competitive scene is not at the forefront of the developers' minds when making the games though, there are bound to be some very poorly designed competitive Pokémon, which is what we will be discussing in this video. Now what makes a Pokémon poorly designed for competitive play is subjective, but what's not subjective is the fact that a lot of these Pokémon I'll be talking about have seen little to no usage in any competitive format that they have been available, or they have seen so much usage that they over-centralize the metagame. So having a poor competitive design does not just mean that a Pokémon is bad, it's that it lacks the proper elements that make it both fun to play as and fun to play against. Specifically, if it has contrasting elements in its kit that work poorly together, such as having offensively oriented stats on a defensive oriented typing or vice versa. If its tools encourage and reward the user for having an uninteresting playstyle, such as ones that revolve around being passive and stalling, or ones that are highly luck-based like evasion. If its tools lack diversity and its competitive game plan consists of just doing the same thing over and over again, or if its tools lack balance, allowing it to be too far over-tuned in one or more aspects of its game plan, ignoring the typical downsides or drawbacks that most Pokémon have. Overall, if the Pokémon is not fun to play as because it is so weak that it hardly functions, or not fun to play against because it is so strong that it makes you rage quit, that is an indication that it is poorly designed. I will mostly be discussing entire archetypes of poorly designed Pokémon, but will still mention some individual Pokémon as well. Keep in mind that I play VGC, so I will be saying this with doubles in mind, although I do feel that a lot of what I'm saying also applies to singles. With all that being said, let's look at the worst designed competitive Pokémon. Starting off, we have Pyukumuku and Wobbuffet, both Pokémon whose offense is based exclusively in counterattacks. These Pokémon learn no attacking moves that have an actual base power, only ones that deal damage based off of how much damage they take from an attack. They get a bunch of status moves that are great for keeping themselves and allies alive, and Pyukumuku does get toxic, which could be good for stalling, but not being able to deal direct damage is a huge flaw. A character whose attacking prowess is based exclusively in counterattacks never has and never will make for an interesting battle design, since it encourages and rewards a passive playstyle. With Wobbuffet, there's essentially two ways that an interaction with it could go. First being that you attack it, it survives the hit, and it uses counter or mirror coat to one-shot you. Second being you don't attack it at first, and instead set up all you want since it literally cannot deal direct damage on its own, allowing you to one-shot it. Do either of these options make for particularly interesting battles? For Pyukumuku, it at least has a built-in setup disruptor and its hidden ability Unaware, but the thing about Pyukumuku is that most sets don't even use an attacking move at all, so if it ever gets taunted, it's quite literally game over for it since it will be forced to struggle until it faints. Neither of these Pokemon are in Gen 9, but in all Gen 7 and 8 formats that I look through on Pikalytics, they have had extremely low usage, the highest for either of them being 0.05% for Pyukumuku. There's honestly no fixing these two from a competitive standpoint since they were doomed from the start, but like I said in the intro, things like this are bound to happen when the competitive scene is not the main focus of the game. They are both very funny though, which I understand was probably the point of their existence, but for this video, their humor is of no value competitively. Next, we have Pokemon that are built to be slow mixed attackers. In my The Case for Power Creep in Pokemon video, I discussed how before the physical special split, some Pokemon were built to be mixed attackers because their dual typing had one physical type and one special type, so they needed both of their attacking stats to be high to get good stab damage. After the physical special split, the physical and special property of a move is now tied to individual moves, not entire types, leading to Pokemon's offensive stats being built to be more min-maxed, so either a physical attacker or special attacker, but not both. I can excuse some of the Pokemon from Gen 3 and before that are built like this, as that was mainly due to an entire mechanic that was changed, but from Gen 4 onward, I cannot excuse this. Normally, most functioning offensive Pokemon are either built to be fast glass cannons or slow bulky attackers, or something relatively in between. A fast glass cannon can outspeed its opponents and knock them out in one hit, so they can get away with having low defenses. A slow bulky attacker will move after its opponent, but since its defenses are good enough to be able to take a hit, it can get away with having low speed. The same cannot be said for slow mixed attackers because they lack both speed and defenses, and instead have those stats wasted in an attacking stat that they don't need. Generally, you do not want both attacking stats to be high, you just want one of them to be high for this exact reason, so that the rest of the stats can be allocated towards speed or defenses. Since these Pokemon are slow, they will tend to move after their opponent, but cannot take very many hits because they don't have the defenses to get away with that, meaning that they have the flaws of both a glass cannon and a slow bulky attacker without enough offense to make up for it. Next, we have Urshifu. Urshifu needs no introduction. I've talked about it like a million times on this channel before, so let's just cut right to the chase. Urshifu's ability allows its contact moves to hit through Protect, and it always lands a critical hit with its signature move. Now, do I think that hitting through Protect is incredibly broken by itself? No. In fact, there have been a decent number of Mons with moves that hit through Protect, like Iron Boulder with Mighty Cleave, Dunsparce with Hyper Drill, and the many users of Phantom Force like Dragapult. None of these Pokemon were ever incredibly broken for being able to hit through Protect, because that alone isn't incredibly broken. Do I think that always landing a critical hit is incredibly broken by itself? Also no. There's Meowscarada with its signature move Flower Trick, and it's definitely good, but again, not incredibly broken by itself. The reason that Urshifu is so broken is because it gets to do both of these at the same time with no drawbacks whatsoever. Even though Urshifu actually has a really wide move pool, since its signature move is just so good, it is not incentivized to have a diverse moveset, it is simply rewarded for spamming one, maybe two moves. Even if you know what's coming, there's really nothing you can do to stop Urshifu. Protecting yourself, raising your defense, setting up Reflect, and lowering its attack are all completely futile. Urshifu also completely shifts the way that a game is played due to its presence. Normally, Protect is one of the most valuable tools on a Pokemon's moveset, as it allows you to scout what your opponent plans on doing, or potentially call out a double up so that your ally can attack, or stall out turns for field conditions or items to take effect. When Urshifu is on the field though, you straight up don't click Protect, because if you do, you're potentially wasting your turn entirely since it will just hit right through. There's even things I haven't mentioned yet, like Surging Strikes hitting multiple times to break through Substitutes, Sturdy, and Focus Ashes, both forms having priority moves, and the fact that both forms have the identical preview sprite, so you can't even tell which is which before battle. To recap, this Pokemon has a wide move pool but only spams one move. It ignores almost all traditional forms of defensive counterplay. It can't be distinguished between its two forms in Team Preview even though almost all other Pokemon with different forms can. It majorly shifts the way that a game is played just by its presence. Urshifu just breaks too many rules, making it very poorly designed. Next, we have Ice types that are built to be slow defensive tanks. Ice's inherent properties make it a Glass Cannon type, as it is very strong offensively, hitting 4 types for super effective, but very weak defensively, having 4 weaknesses and only 1 resistance to itself. So, an Ice-type Pokemon's stats should be arranged with high offense and high speed to complement Ice's offensive properties so that it synergizes well. Unfortunately, that is not the case for these Pokemon that are instead built to be slow and defensive. If you want to set up your offense, Ice doesn't really have great options for that since most Ice-type status moves are defensive too. Snow increases Ice-type's defense, and Aurora Veil can only be used when snowing and increases defense and special defense for 5 turns. Ice types also have the passive immunity to being frozen and being hit with sheer cold, all things that will not really help these Ice types offensively. If you're looking for a defensive wall on your team, you would never choose any of these Ice types. A defensive Pokemon should have few weaknesses and many resistances or immunities, which these ice types do not. You'd much rather have a Mon with a better defensive typing like pretty much any steel, poison, fire, or fairy type. If you're looking for a fast sweeper, well, these Pokemon are not fast sweepers, so you'd never even consider them for that role. It's no surprise that as soon as Game Freak introduced ice types that are built like a glass cannon or have a way to set up, they have actually been good. These ice types though cannot take advantage of their good offensive typing since their stats are built to be defensive. They can't take advantage of their good defensive stats since their type is built to be offensive and have no reliable way of setting up. The only thing they can set up for is failure. Next, we have high base stat Pokemon with drawback abilities, Slacking, Regigigas, Archeops, and Wishiwashi. Base stats are no doubt one of the biggest factors towards a Pokemon's competitive viability. Same goes for abilities, just to a lesser extent, because a lot of Pokemon can get away with abilities that have little to no effect, as long as it's not an ability with an actively harmful effect, which is the issue for these Pokemon. Slacking's Truant makes it only able to attack every other turn, Regigigas' Slow Start makes its attack and speed halved for 5 turns, Archeops' Defeatus makes its attack and special attack stat halved when its HP drops to half or below, and Wishiwashi's Schooling makes it the weakest Pokemon of all time when its HP drops to 25% and below. But this is okay since these Pokemon have high base stats, so these drawback abilities will help balance them out, right? In reality, the drawbacks on these abilities are way too high for any of these Pokemon to be good. Not being able to attack every other turn, having attack and speed, having attack and special attack, or turning into a tiny fish with baby stats is extremely crippling. The only time these Pokemon have seen any kind of use in recent formats is when there's a way to nullify their abilities, like with Weezing's Neutralizing Gas or Grafaiai's Doodle, except for Wishiwashi since its ability can't be changed. The main issue is that most Pokemon's ability help them in some way, even if that use is very specific and not something that will come up in every game. For example, if a Volcarona or Garchomp are never hit with a contact move for the duration of a battle, the effects of their abilities will not come up, so in some cases, their abilities are useless. However, these abilities do not harm them in any way, so at worst they are useless. These Pokemon's abilities are at best useless. Otherwise, they provide strictly negative effects. Now there is a Pokemon that sort of fits this archetype that's actually good, which is Palafin. Palafin is a high base stat Pokemon with a drawback ability that actually works because its drawback is very manageable, just needing to switch out. There's plenty of videos from other creators on how to buff these terrible abilities, so I won't touch on that too much, but the point is, it is absolutely possible for this archetype to work if the ability's drawback is actually workable, but for Slacking, Regigigas, Archeops, and Wishiwashi, the drawbacks on their abilities are way too high. Lastly, we have Sneasler, a Pokemon that rose to prominence and toxicity in Regulation H, the competitive format in Scarlet and Violet that banned all legendary, paradox, and mythical Pokemon. This meant that the previously stated poorly designed fighting type Urshifu could not be used, which was oftentimes picked over Sneasler if you wanted a fighting type on your team. With Urshifu banned though, Sneasler stepped up to be the toxic one. The issue with Sneasler mainly comes down to its signature move, Dire Claw. Dire Claw is an 80 base power, 100% accurate, physical attacking poison type move that has a 50% chance of inflicting the target with poison, paralysis, or sleep, with each of those status conditions being equally likely. With Sneasler's high attack and high speed that can be boosted with Unburden, chances are it's going to get off multiple Dire Claws in a match, which can potentially shift the game entirely in your favor if you get that lucky 1 in 6 chance of putting your opponent to sleep, definitely the most deadly out of those 3 status conditions. There's a reason that most moves that can put a Pokemon to sleep are given low accuracy, and the ones with high accuracy are given to very slow Pokemon. While Sneasler is far from guaranteed in being able to put its opponents to sleep with Dire Claw, it is guaranteed to do damage as it is 100% accurate, coming off a very strong and fast Pokemon. The chance to cause status is purely a bonus thrown on top of that, which is where the RNG aspect gets involved. Now I honestly don't think that Sneasler is that poorly designed, but I did still want to mention it because strategies like increasing evasion with Minimize, going for 30% accurate one-hit KO moves, and now Sneasler's Dire Claw are hated because they are very luck-based, and Pokemon fans have massive negativity bias. Negativity bias is the cognitive process where if you are exposed to a positive and negative form of stimulus of equal intensity within a given experience, you'll only focus on the negative form of stimulus from that experience. People complain that moves like Focus Blast miss all the time, but don't seem to celebrate when it hits nearly as much as they complain when it misses. I feel that this bias works in this way because hitting the attack, or in Dire Claw's case, not getting put to sleep, is actually not an equally positive event, but rather seen as the default outcome. We are used to attacking moves not putting us to sleep, so anything that shifts from that is going to stand out. Look at it like this. If someone asks, "How are you?" and you say, "Good," no one bats an eye because that's kind of just the default response. But if someone asks, "How are you?" and you say, "Bad," then they'll start asking, "Why? What's wrong?" Because that's different from the default response, even though it is of equal intensity to the other response of saying that you are doing good. Anything shifting from the default outcome is obviously going to stand out more, which is why negativity bias is a thing, and one of the reasons contributing to why so many players hate Sneasler. In my opinion though, it still does not break nearly as many rules that Urshifu breaks, and we've already seen Sneasler drop way off in the second installment of Reg G because of that. And those are, in my opinion, the worst designed competitive Pokemon. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with any of my reasonings, or feel that I missed any. The best designed competitive Pokemon video is already in the works, but feel free to leave your suggestions for any Pokemon I should include. Anyway, if you want to support me and my channel, the best way to do so is just by leaving a nice comment. I do read all comments and will try my best to respond to as many as I can. You can also click the join button and become a member, and I made the cost as low as possible at 99 cents USD. Members get a badge next to their name and early video access. Keep in mind that these videos will be releasing on my normal schedule for non-members, so please don't feel obligated at all to join unless you really want to support me and you are financially capable of doing so. Huge thanks to all my members. I really appreciate your continued support for the channel. Likes are also one of the ways that YouTube determines if a video should be passed around to more people, so if you feel that this video deserves to be, I would appreciate it. Thanks for watching.